My name is Gunter Hauer. I was born in Berlin in 1919, which is a couple of years ago. If I make it another 10 days, I'll be 95. I got that figured out right. I built a very nice American family. In fact, the craziest thing, what I'm telling you, I never told my oldest son. I mean, he knew where I came from and where I was, but he never heard it he heard it from his mother, he heard it from his Bobby, but he never heard actually my story. My dad came from a very religious family. I'm not religious. I go to the high holidays, I go to synagogue. That's what I did in Berlin, that's what I'm doing, and what I did in Shanghai when I could, and that's what I'm doing here. My dad's father was the honorary chazan for the high holidays in the state of where they lived. He lived between Russia and Germany, not in Poland, near Danzig. It was German territory, but then eventually he moved to Berlin and met my mom. I lived in Berlin all my first 19 years, and every other street corner you would find a Litwas-Säule, a big round pillar with advertising pasted on it, and until I was 17 years old, I should say, that's where I got my information, what I'm going to do that particular day, what time I'm going to go see my friends, what time I might go to the movies. We certainly weren't wealthy or weren't rich. We had enough money to live, and live good. Vacations, I belonged to a sports club. My parents paid for a dance class. I learned how to dance. You know, what every parent will do for their child, whatever they can to make it better than they had it when they were little. I belonged to the Jewish Scouts, called their gelbe Fleck, the yellow spot, and we proudly wore it. We didn't have to. That was before it was a law that you had to have a certain identification that everybody could see that you're Jewish in case you didn't look Jewish. Until one day I came out and there was this paint, red paint or black paint, written in big letters, do not buy at Jewish stores, at Jewish-owned pharmacies. What happened was at that time, German President Hindenburg invited Adolf Hitler, the leader of the brown shirts of the Nazi party, to become Prime Minister of Germany. And every Jewish family knew that Adolf Hitler hated Jews. He wasn't even German. He was Austrian. And he became Reichskanzler of Germany. Between the time he started to be Reichskanzler until President Hindenburg died, we thought that this guy's not going to last long. Give him 3 months, give him 6 months, he'll be out of a job. Well, Hindenburg at that stage was, I believe, in his high 80s. He was an old man, and he passed away soon after Hitler took over the government. That was the first time that I saw I'm not that welcome anymore in Berlin. And I had friends left and right where I lived, and it didn't matter. We didn't ask each other, are you Jewish, are you Catholic, are you Christian? We were just grown-up kids in streets of Berlin. But all of a sudden this changed. Slowly over the time between, I would say between 1931 or 1933 and 1936, things slowly started to develop in their favor against us. One week it was told that we can't go into the parks anymore and sit down because we're Jewish. And then came 1936, and we had the Olympic Games. I lived about less than an hour, maybe 45 minutes away from the Olympic Stadium. Incidentally, I saw Adolf Hitler because there was a large hall not far from where my home was, where they had meetings and conferences and so forth. And my friends and I, we used to go there and see, let's see what that guy looks like. I saw Adolf Hitler walking out of his big Mercedes and his brown shirt uniform. And that was before he was in government. Maybe a week before the Olympics started, I heard a knock on the door. And what do I see? I see a black lady. I've never seen a black person in my life before. I didn't even know there were black people. Maybe it was stupid, but they didn't advertise it in Germany. Anyway, she was actually very beautiful, young, and spoke a fluent German, and said that the Berlin government gave me your address, and I wonder if I can, during the Olympics, I have tickets to go there, can stay with you. And my parents fell in love with her because she was a very lovely person. I don't know whether she was American or South African. She was black. And so now I know there are black people. I got educated early. And she moved in. She went every day. The third day, she called me and said, Gunter, I am so tired. I've been every day at the Olympics. I can't go today. Would you like to go? Well, let me ask you something. How would you feel? What would you think if somebody comes to you and says, hey, would you like to go? You're 17 years old. Would you like to go and see the Olympics? Sure. Well, within an hour, I was at the Olympics. And imagine the Olympic Stadium is oval, correct? At 9, 10 rows up was His Majesty Adolf Hitler with his gang watching the Olympic, what was going on. At 5, that's where, I can't remember her name, I don't know what was her name, what the lady's seat was, and Adolf Hitler and I, we were on the same rows. I could look into his eyes, practically, with my field glasses. And guess what was at 3? Jesse Owens competing in the long jump. Well, it was terrific for me to watch. I was excited. Who won? Jesse Owens won. And everybody got wild and applauded. What did my friend Adolf Hitler do? He walked out because he couldn't stomach that a black person won a gold medal and it wasn't won by a German. He walked out. Jesse Owens won the gold. He died. Jesse Owens won the gold, and I'm still alive. When the Olympics were over, all of a sudden, the first law came out that German people will not go to German Jewish doctors. they're not allowed to go. Only Jewish people can go to Jewish doctors. Most of the business were taken over by Germans. This was one of the first, I would say, 6 months. You know, every couple of weeks a new law came out. You can't do this, you can't do that. Then, all of a sudden, we found out that lawyers and doctors and business owners were arrested and taken to concentration camps. Why? Because they're Jewish. Luckily, my parents or me were never caught because we were very, very, very careful not to be seen practically. You know, when it really got bad in the last 2 years of before the war started, I said to my dad, I said, what are we going to do? He lost his job. I lost my job because they also took me out of school. I wasn't allowed to be in school anymore. The Jüdische Gemeinde, the Jewish, like the JNF, they started their own Jewish schools, but nobody really paid attention, nobody really cared. What am I learning? What good is it? Because tomorrow they're going to tell the teachers not to teach anymore. They made it difficult from every corner, wherever they could. And a friend of mine, he went to Shanghai, and before he left, he told me that I'll see how it is, and if it is good as we are told, I'll let you know. Shanghai was a place where you didn't need anything. If you had the money, you take the next ship and you get to Shanghai. All you have to do is get off the boat. Anybody can get off the boat and arrive. All the crooks of the world lived there and became wealthy citizens and honest people. Well, he wrote me that he got a good job with a Swiss company, and if I can make it there, he'll get me a job. I wouldn't have to worry about it. And you're free. We didn't have the money to go. My aunt worked for a tourist bureau, and she said there's a Russian tourist bureau in Berlin. They're selling trips to Vladivostok by train, from Berlin to Vladivostok, from Vladivostok, Russia to Kobe, Japan, from Kobe, Japan to Shanghai. My dad had enough money in his saving account he could afford for us. We booked, my aunt and her mom and daughter booked, and my dad's oldest brother and wife booked. The 8 of us, we were ready to go to Shanghai. Because we had a booking to get out of Germany, we were able to ask to get a passport. Even though we were not citizens anymore, we had to get a passport to get out of the country. So we got a German passport. It was a big red J. All of a sudden, my name was Gunter J. Red J. Hauer. Finally, after a month and a half or 2 months, we got word that we can come and pick up our passports, and everybody else who did this. Yeah, I mean, like, they booked, I don't know, thousands of people. They went to pick up their tickets. They were closed up. It was a scam. It was a Russian tourist bureau, which wasn't really a tourist bureau. They got their money and they probably went to Shanghai. Well, that was pretty sad because it was a shock. We got the passport, we can go out today, but we can't because we got nowhere to go. Me and thousands of others. And they took our money, our last savings. Well, thanks a lot to my aunt. she found out that there was a ship going from London the following day to Shanghai, a Japanese liner, the Terukuni Maru. I'll never forget the name. Yeah, great. But they had open cabins, but we didn't have the money. So my dad knew somebody he grew up with who worked at the Jüdische Gemeinde, the JNF of Berlin. And he told him the story, what shall we do? He said, no problem. He had a life insurance. He assigned his life, you could do this in those days. You assigned your life insurance money to the Jüdische Gemeinde. They paid for the trip for us. My uncle had enough money and my aunt had enough money they could pay. It was very expensive. They almost used all up their money just to get on the ship, and we did. Within 2 days, we were in Trieste on the ship. The first morning, we getting into the Suez Canal, we hear on the radio that the Germans started World War II and went into Poland. That's how close I got stuck in Berlin, in Germany. On the boat, like the Japanese knew little German, but spoke very hard English, which I didn't want to learn. But I wasn't afraid to talk to them. When I finally met English-speaking people, I got a little embarrassed because I had 3 or 4 months while I was still in school of learning English and French, and I couldn't go too far with that. It took 28 days from Italy to Shanghai, China. Shanghai was an open city, was run by 5 countries. United States, Great Britain, there was a French town that was number 3, then there was Italy, and then there was the Japanese town. These 5 countries run the city. Well, the good thing was we were free. We found a place to stay, and I found a job. I found my friend. My friend found me. He was happy to see me. He did get me a job. We ate again. We didn't have to say thank you to anybody. We were on our own. I made enough money, or almost enough money, to feed the 3 of us. It was a good feeling. And I sold typewriter cleaning. And I used to go to American and English offices mostly. And I learned a lot of words which I never heard before. And I had a little dictionary. When I heard a word which I didn't know what it was, and I looked it up, and I learned another word. The first word I didn't know, what I never learned in school, was, what the heck was it? I forgot. Then I was invited to, after a year or 2, I was invited to a wedding of a friend of mine. It was the first time in my life that I was tipsy. And I woke up in the morning and my head was going around. My mom says to me, World War II started for Japan against the United States. It was that weekend. And I couldn't care less. I said, I got nothing to do with that. Went back to sleep. That's all I could do. Anyway, what was I going to do? Well, within months, the Japanese learned from the Germans what to do with Jewish refugees. The nice time we had for a couple of years being free, all of a sudden we were put into a designated area. They didn't call it a camp. It was a camp, but the Japanese called it a designated area. And there was a tiny Japanese lieutenant. He became the king of the Jews. We had to register with him. every month they gave us a sort of a medal to carry, tell us to allow us to be during daylight time in the city because they weren't helping us. We all of a sudden we lived in a bummed down home. I could see the sky. We had a one-room apartment, and next to us lived a Japanese, tall Japanese who was born in Hawaii, spoke fluent Japanese, spoke fluent American English. He was married to a half Japanese, half German, beautiful lady who fell in love with my mom because she was able to talk German, the only German-speaking woman she met in Shanghai. They were very nice to us. He was in charge of English department of Domi News Agency. Domi News was the equivalent of Reuters or United Press, like here in the United States, like the news agencies. And I got the contract to clean the typewriters. I knew what was going on in the world because I could see the ticker telling the real thing. The translation was that the Japanese took this island, the Japanese took this island. That was all phonies. During the years we were in the designated area, did I mention to you that we were not allowed to go to the cemetery? Well, it's not such a pretty story, but that's what happened to me. When I was single, I was with the boys, like any other guy. And we always watched the girls. And there was one lady which was better looking, cleaner looking, nicer looking. We maybe passed each other and said hello or goodbye or whatever it was, but we had no connection. She was much younger than I am. If you wanted to visit somebody at the cemetery, you only could go there with somebody else's funeral in a group. You were not allowed to get out of, because it was 10 miles out of the designated area, the camp, the Jewish camp. When my father, may he rest in peace, passed away, this lady was on my funeral, on my father's funeral, because her dad passed away 2 or 3 months earlier, and she wanted to go back to the cemetery to visit the. Now, we had to walk. It was a long walk in one group, friends and strangers who wanted to come along. On the way home, we were allowed to take the trolley, which we did. And here's my mom, may she rest in peace, sitting. I'm sitting here, and this lady is hanging in front of me. Well, the nice guy I am, and the gentleman I was, I gave her my seat. For 72 years, she never got up. I married her. That's my story. Thank you very much. She just passed away 2 years ago. But from that day on, we were together every day. The first 7 years during the war, we were just good friends, and people thought eventually we're going to get married. But we didn't want to get married during the war. We married in Shanghai, and we came together and we built a beautiful American family. Both my sons were in the Air Force, and in fact, my oldest son got me in here. He was working, after he got out of the Air Force, he worked for the U.S. Navy, like a couple of blocks away. She was from Berlin. She got there before me. She was one of the ones, her parents were very well off. She was very well educated, much more than I. Not very well educated. I'm who I am. She was a wonderful wife. Hey, we lasted that long. If she would have not liked me, we wouldn't have stayed that long together. And I miss her every day. The next thing is the war is over. 3 United States soldiers, GIs, fly into Shanghai because Shanghai became the meeting place before you go home. The GIs came to visit us in our camp. I asked a really dumb question. I said, how far are American troops from Shanghai? He said, 3 feet, which is true. You stand in front of me. I was thinking of, the troops. You didn't see a Japanese person on the street. They were told, like the first boat you can get out. They all went to Japan. I mean, not in one day, but within 3 days. First of all, some of them got beaten up pretty good by our boys, trust me. They weren't the kings of the Jews anymore. The first few days, all they did was hiring, and they helped a lot of our people getting first-time jobs with making some money. I had number 3 on my card of being a civilian employee of the United States Port Command. I saw American dollars. It looked pretty good, I'll tell you that. I was in charge of 6x6 GMCs, trucks, spare parts. I had no idea about automobiles. I couldn't drive. But I didn't know there were numbers. This is number 2357, and this part is 2358. I couldn't make a mistake. 3 weeks later, we get word that General Wiedemeyer who was in charge of all the troops in the Far East, is going to come and visit the port command. Oh, we're going to see the top man. I'm dressed real clean and everything. And here he comes, and guess who was with him? My friend Richard Iwatade, my neighbor, from the Domi News Agency. And there was a book out by Winston Churchill about the war years. He mentioned General Wiedemeyer at one point, and with General Wiedemeyer he mentioned Iwatade, Richard Iwatade. Richard Iwatade, all these years he was in Shanghai, he was an American spy. You see, a Jewish kid from Berlin being friendly with an American spy during the war. How many guys do you find like that? Finally, we found out that we have a choice. We can go back to Germany or Austria or wherever we came from, or we can go to Israel, or the Congress of the United States allowed us to come in a multiple affidavit. Everybody will automatically be accepted. Finally, we go to the United States. I'm on the way to go to America. I get to San Francisco, and it was the 14th of July, which is a French holiday. I didn't know that. And we get off the boat, and here comes a parade. And I said to my wife, man, this is great. They even send a band to greet us. No, it wasn't for us. It was the French holiday. The Jewish service in San Francisco told us that they put us up in hotels. We were, I think, We were about 200 or 300 refugees. Where did you plan to go? I said, I would like to go to Cincinnati. Why did I want to go to Cincinnati? Because friends of mine, before the war, came to the United States and settled down in Cincinnati. So I was in touch with them. They expected me to come there, and they said they'll get me a job, etc., etc., etc. And that was my destination. It took another 3 weeks, and we had a good life and could eat. The first time I drank milk again without worrying that I have to boil it and be careful with it, and could live like a person again. I said to my wife, when we got off the boat, from now on, whether we're doing it right or we're doing it wrong, we're only going to talk English. No more German. And we did. We're there. We get to Cincinnati. And at that time, all the GIs who came home, when they got a job, the government allowed, I think, a certain percentage of their salary the government would pay, so they would get jobs right away, and the companies didn't have to pay the whole thing. Now, I wasn't a GI, even though I worked for the American Port Command, the U.S. Port Command, but the San Francisco JNF took care of that. Wherever a Jewish guy who wasn't a citizen could get a job, they would, in the beginning, start paying the percentage. They told us exactly how much money we get because we had a minimum salary. They didn't have unlimited funds, and it kept us alive. And I got a job in a record company, King Records. King Records was owned by Sid Nason. I got a job as a shipper, and trust me, 25 of those records were in one box. I had to lift. It was all right. I wasn't very strong, but hey, it was a good job. Within 3 months, I became in charge of the second shipping. In other words, like instead of coming in at 9 o'clock and leave at 5 or 6 o'clock, whatever it was, I came in at 5 or 6 o'clock and left at 11 o'clock. I was in charge. They liked what they saw. I was in the record business. I can't sing. I can't play an instrument. I can't read notes. But I'm in the record business. You can't get that job today. You have to have a degree to be in the record business. 6 months later, they sent me to, guess where? Across from Goodies on 10th Avenue to New York. I was in charge of the King Record branch in New York. Hey man, I got it made. My dreams come true. When I was little, I was reading books about the United States, America, Indians, cowboys. Man, I'm right there. I got to New York in the fall. 2 months later, I'm standing, my wife got pregnant, and we were standing on Times Square watching Milton Berle come in on Mason Parade. Man, I'm in heaven. We lived in Spanish Harlem on 120 and 123rd Street, Manhattan. I felt real good. I'm about 50 yards away from Goodies, the original Goodies in Manhattan on 10th Avenue. And we had the hottest black record, rhythm and blues record, called I Love You, Yes I Do, by guess who? Bull Moose Jackson. That was the guy's name. We had other hits. I mean, you couldn't go 125th Street without hearing it blasting out of every store. And it was a big record. The first big, I must have given them luck because it was the first #1 record they had since they existed. They had rhythm and blues and country and western. What a combination. This was one of the songs which I knew from way back. Sid Nason used to come every 2-3 months to New York, and when he came to New York, he had a friend who was his distributor in Philadelphia. And one time, this gentleman from Philly came when Sid Nason wasn't in town, and he started to talk to me, and then he said, "Schmuck, what are you doing in New York City? I can give you a job in Philadelphia. You'll make more money, and I think you'll be very happy there." Because he knew where I'm living right now. We were living in, was absolutely safe where I lived, but we lived on the 4th floor, and my wife had to take the carriage and the baby 4 flights up every day. She was strong enough to, she could well do that. She took my son to Central Park every day. Nobody bothered her, and everybody talked to everybody. And I discussed it naturally with my wife, and we had friends in Philadelphia who settled down here, and she said, "Oh yeah, great, come to town." And we did. And that's how I got to Philly. The music business became more important, and we did pretty good. And a couple of people asked me if I and somebody else would start our own distributing company, and with more money, and we didn't say no. Well, eventually we were distributors of Atco Records. Atco Records had Bobby Darin, and they were the subsidiary of Atlantic Records. And I was in sales and promotion, and I was practically, I wasn't a partner, but I made good money. Let's put it that way. First time I could say I can put some money, start putting money away. Because the first 2 years I didn't take any vacation. I took the money instead and kept on working through, because like I started a family. All of a sudden I had American children. I think Atlantic Records kind of saw what they saw we doing in Philadelphia. And I was in touch with them practically every day. I was in touch every day with Dick Clark, because like our music was played at Dick Clark's. And we became a pretty hot local distributor. Let's put it that way. And after a few years, Atlantic Records gave me a job. And that was my last job at Atlantic Records, and I was with them 17 years. And I think I've been in almost every major city in the United States. And I can tell you, this country is beautiful. You don't have to go outside to look for good-looking land and good-looking cities. We've got it right here at home. Now, we settled down, and eventually I landed here, where you see me, at the HHP. That's where my family is now. My friends, all my children live somewhere else in the United States, except my daughter's not so far away. But she's busy with her daughter, my first granddaughter, and you know that keeps her busy. She needs more help than I do.